I I had to look up what the word indomitable meant. I did not know that word, I have to admit. And so I discovered that it means that cannot be subdued or overcome, will or courage, unconquerable. And I'd love to know why you chose that word for your name, the Indomitable Black Man.
I'm Afro-Indigenous, and on both sides of my family, one was eradicated, one was enslaved. And
Hmm.
so a part of who I am and my identity is, and my platform is about liberating people who are trapped in institutional systems of oppression. And it was drapetomaniac, as in someone who has a mental illness, which is the desire to run away. And then I changed it to the Indomitable Black Man because I'm not one, or my aspiration is to be one that cannot be dominated, that cannot be
Hmm.
held down or oppressed by any system or any institution that would want to oppress me. So that's kind
Hmm.
of where that came from.
I love that. That makes sense. And it's definitely in line with the work that you do. Absolutely. So the number one headline that I found when I Google you is this line that says this guy's been slapped, spat on, and bitten by kids, and he still stands by gentle parenting, and here's why. Like this is the thing that's associated with your name. So I'd love to hear kind of your journey to becoming a content creator who promotes respectful or gentle parenting practices.
Okay, well, it also, before I do any of that, I need to let you know I have a husky.
No
And my
worries.
husky is verbal, and he will start to yip and bark. So if you hear that in the background, that's because he's wanting attention.
Oh, good. We
He's
can we
insane.
can cut that out. It won't bother me. I'm used
Okay,
to
good.
being in loud environments.
Okay, great. I just
Yeah,
didn't want to
all
be like
good.
be on the recording. All right. This was not a journey that was easy. It was very hard. There were a lot of ups and downs, and it started off with me being homeless. And I had been in school for biomedical sciences. That's what my plan was to do. I was going to go and I was going to major in infectious disease and oncology. That was going to be my life's goal. As far back as I can remember, that was my dream. And when I became homeless, I started working at my church's private school. And I was a Bible teacher. I taught Hebrew and I taught theater, nothing too big. Um, Needed money, so I did it. It was great. I fell in love with the job. My theater professor, she kind of convinced me to go into the route of education because she saw how well I was with kids. And I was like, I mean, it's a free undergrad. I do love kids. And as I continued towards the goal of education, I switched my career up, and I became a registered behavioral technician, which works in the field of applied behavioral analysis. And basically, I just work with children who are on the spectrum, and I work with kids who are very aggressive, who need to learn life skills, things of that nature. I also need to preface this. A lot of people are against ABA. There was old school ABA that was very ableist, that was about suppressing autistic traits. I did not
Hmm.
practice that. My BCBAs never told me to practice anything like that. I focused specifically on doing things that would increase the quality of life, like how to tie your shoes, how to put in your clothes, how to shower, how to pay people, how to literally live, and how to also control any dangerous behavior or self-injurious behavior. That's all I did.
Hmm.
So just throwing that out there. I did that for
Appreciate
about
that.
10 years, and that's where I experienced most of the things that turned me into a gentle parent.
Mm.
I've been kicked in the chest by a 6-year-old. I was backhanded by a 5-year-old. I have, you name it, it's happened to me. And so
Yeah.
when I'm looking at parents and they're talking about the things that their children do that sends them up a wall, like talking back, I'm like, baby, you have no idea. You have no idea. The grass is not greener on the other side. You don't know how good your child is. And because I've seen how bad children can be, not saying that kids are bad, but how bad the behaviors can be, and
Right.
I can still control myself, I can still help regulate the child, and then teach the child how to regulate themselves. I know that you can do that with your neurotypical child.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if it can work here, it can work there. Here's how we make it work there. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I got to where I am today.
You know, it's so interesting that you say that because yesterday when I have a son who's almost 3 and he's exhibiting behaviors that are very consistent with 3-year-olds, right? But my husband got home and I was like, I am so glad that I have done all this work on myself leading up to this moment because I can tell what it feels like when a child is directing physical aggression at you
Mhm.
and that anger wells up in you and you feel it. And if you don't know what to do with it and you don't know how to control it, you could snap. And I get it. I think people who hear maybe what you're saying are like, well, you just don't feel it as strongly as I do, or your kid isn't as bad. And it's like, oh, I exactly like I feel it. It's just that I can imagine had I had a kid 10 years ago, I would probably be reacting in a very, very different way. And so learning those skills is so important. But I think something, you know, striking about your background and your story is that this like gentle parenting space is filled really with white women. There aren't a lot of people like you that are talking about this stuff. And so I'm wondering like how do you think that's helped you? How has it hindered your message? Like what is it like to be one of the only people in this space that has your background?
It has been very bittersweet.
Yeah.
One of the When I first started really getting into this platform, when first started blowing up, a lot of the people were white women.
Mhm.
If you look on my analytics, it's predominantly women and it's predominantly white women. It's
That are
still
following
something
you.
that are following me.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
because of that, it also kind of diminishes the efficacy of my platform because it's used against me as you don't know what you're talking about. You was raised in the wrong generation. Did it like pick an excuse that they have? Oh, that's that
Totally.
white people parenting.
Yep. Yep.
No. Did you know that Black people were not hitting their children prior to colonization? Do you know that
Mhm.
corporal punishment for children has its roots in Europe? Like antiquity, like the Greek Spartans would take their 5 and 6 year old boys and put them
Mhm.
in the agoge where they would beat them. What?
Yeah.
It's been really hard, especially as a Black man living in the South that grew up in the hood where
Mhm.
getting hit and spanked is the norm. It takes away from a lot of that. I actually have a friend who's Afro Dominican, and he makes fun of me all the time, especially back
Mm.
when I didn't have kids. I have a 16-year-old that I've adopted essentially, but I'm not I'm not a biological father. And so he's like, "You don't know
Mhm.
what you're talking about, da, da, da." Baby. Behavior is the same.
Yeah.
Your mom was beating you. That was abuse. You just don't see it because you probably Stockholmed into thinking that it's okay. And that's what I see with the Black and brown communities. Native
Mhm.
Americans, African Americans, and Latino Americans, the same kind of concept where beating your kids, one, is a remnant of what happened on the plantation, but it's being
Yeah.
perpetuated down even to now, and it's not benefiting anything. And so although I'm reaching a lot of Black people where a lot of my brothers and sisters are waking up to see that no, we don't have to put our hands on our kids, there's still so many that are still blinded by, even on my Instagram right now, there are so many Black people commenting on one of my videos about a kid just saying no. And they're like, oh no, it's the bill. You got to beat these kids. And oh, you being too soft. Why do I have to be hard with the child?
Mhm. Mhm.
It comes from that slave mentality
Yeah.
that we have
Yeah.
so hard to break away from. Otherwise, it's going to continue to put us in the same situation we're in. Um, I'll say this is my last point for this specific thing. One of the biggest tropes that you hear in the African American community is I'm beating you now so the cops won't have to later.
Oh,
But when you
interesting.
sit and you analyze that critically, George Floyd, Philando Castile, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, pick a single person, Eric Garner, pick any of them, Daniel Shaver, even, he was a white guy. I guarantee to you, every single one of them got their butts kicked on a daily. I
Mhm.
guarantee it, they got their behinds beat. But in every situation, in every case, their lives were taken from them. So it has nothing to do with spanking. It
Mhm.
has everything to do with just teaching your child how to handle those specific interactions.
Yeah.
My dad was a cop. He showed me how to deal with those interactions. My mom
Mhm.
taught me how to deal with those interactions.
Yeah.
They didn't have to beat me to do it. That
Mhm.
that that doesn't make sense. You're just
Mhm.
finding yet another way to perpetuate the slave mentality. I'm beating you now so the master won't have to later. Baby, the master's gonna beat you just because the sun is up. Master
Yeah.
gonna beat you just because he feel like doing it. So it's not benefiting anybody. And I really want to see more of my people wake up to
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
realization that this is detrimental to our people. It causes precocious puberty, which is why we think some of these girls out here are fast. No, it's because you beat them into their body's head. Basically, hey, let's go ahead and prepare to reproduce just in case we don't live long enough to do it.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're saying.
No, it's, I've never heard that saying about, the police, and I think it makes a lot of sense, especially with the data that we have on, you're right, puberty, women who are exposed to domestic violence at home being more likely to enter those relationships in adulthood, or to think that that's normal in partnerships, that it it doesn't pan out the way that we think it's going to, that you
Mhm.
physically, people like to use the word physically disciplining or punishing, but you're using the words I usually use, which is abuse, is going to somehow prevent you from ending up in those situations, when if anything, it makes it more likely.
Mhm. Exactly. And that's what I
Yeah.
really need people to understand. There is no separation. Physical discipline is abuse. Unless, like, I grab a kid's head and I just turn them and steer them, that's a form of correction of their physical path. But I'm not putting my hands on a kid to hurt them or to harm them. No, I'm literally guiding their head. You're out here putting your hands on a child to inflict damage so that
Hmm.
they can figure out something different to do instead of just teaching them. No, baby, that's abuse. Just call it what it is. It's abuse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's a comment that I wrote down that you get on a lot of your videos, and I get on mine as well, is like, you know, kids need discipline. And it's like equating this word discipline with physical abuse, right? And I
Hmm.
was wondering if you could speak to like what discipline actually is, and talk about this idea of like, we don't teach through hitting or physical
Hmm.
harm.
Yes. And discipulus actually comes, well, discipline comes from the word discipulus, which means to instruct or to teach, which is why you have a disciple. Jesus wasn't going around here beating his disciples to teach them something when they did something stupid. I mean, can you imagine a world?
Hmm.
We wouldn't really follow him. I take martial arts. I'm a disciple of my Sifu. My Sifu doesn't beat me. Now, granted, he puts his hands on me every now and again to show me a technique or to
Right.
show me how to do something more effective, but that's not him punishing me for doing something wrong. That's him correcting what I'm doing. So the concept of discipline being something where you have to hit them is, it does not match. It actually comes from the 12th century in France, where that was kind of the norm, right? Let's just, beat people, make them fear us. That completely different from what discipline actually is. It is to teach. It is to guide. If you were walking down a path, you have guardrails up or fences up, so you stay on that path. That's essentially what discipline should look like. It looks like teaching your child explicitly what they should be doing, or teaching them in a natural environment. When I was in
Hmm.
RBT, we had two types of training. We had DTT and then we had NET. And DTT was basically you would sit down with somebody and you would, let's say we were trying to learn about colors, right? We would put three colors out and we'd say, point to red. And if they pointed to the wrong one, we would take their hand, redirect it to the right color and say, this is that color. Good job. And then give them a reinforcer. We would
Hmm.
do that over multiple trials until they understand that this color has this word associated with it. That's DTT. Now, NET is natural environment where we've practiced something, we've role played like a social interaction, and we go and practice that. You can do that all the time. You do that all the time anyway. If you were training
Yeah.
somebody on the job, you're doing the same thing. If you're training somebody for in school, you're doing the same thing. The education doesn't stop, and behavior or information acquisition looks pretty synonymous. We've been doing it for centuries, millennia.
Hmm.
Don't change it up by just beating a kid. Teach them what they should be doing, because spanking doesn't teach it does not teach anything. It teaches them,
Hmm.
if it were to teach anything, just how to fear you. But it's not teaching
Yeah.
them what they should be doing. Don't spank your kid because they stole something from the store. Get them a job. Don't spank your kid because he lied. Put him in a position to not lie. Don't hit your kid because they were out past curfew. Give them ways to get in before curfew. There's so many different things that we can be doing,
Mm-hmm.
but our whole mindset is we want to build strong, healthy kids. But you don't beat a kid down to build them up. We're
Mm-hmm.
not in the military. Even the military don't put
Yeah.
their hands on you like that no more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because, like, I think people feel that when they're parenting this way, when they're using physical force and they're being like quote unquote tough, that they're in charge and they're strong. And to me, I see it as like such weakness or like laziness in a way of like, you are taking the easiest route here. You're not teaching, you're not explaining, you're not getting in touch with your feelings. Like, to me, when I see someone behaving that way, I'm like, oh, it makes me sad. Like, I'm like, you must not have any other tools. And so it's weird how we've been conditioned to believe that that is somehow like tough, powerful parenting. I don't know
Yeah.
if you see that a lot as well.
I'm a 7th grade middle school teacher. Yes, I see it all the time. Um, I feel sorry for people once you start to really understand behavior and that it's a form of communication. You start to realize that everything that you're saying is bound by an antecedent. There is something that's preceding this behavior that causes the behavior, and that leads to either reinforcing of that behavior where it increases, or it punishes the behavior where it decreases. But in a lot of cases, it increases. So you're seeing these adults who have not been taught how to self-regulate. You're seeing adults who have not been taught how to critically think about their actions or their choices, and so they've been put out into the real world without being fully raised, and they've just had to figure it out as they go along. And so they're pushing that same thing on their children. I think one of the most sobering realities for me when I became an adult in my like mid 20s was realizing that my parents had no idea what they were doing, and they were just stumbling through life.
That's a
Like,
crazy moment to realize. It really
yeah,
is. Yeah.
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 And it was comforting, but it was also terrifying. It was comforting in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that, okay, so I don't have to have it all figured out yet, but terrifying in the way that, hold up, so y'all was just doing stuff and didn't really know how it was going to affect me later in life?
It's
What?
wild.
And
Mm-hmm.
so my job is to provide parents with as much information as possible so they're not making the same mistakes. So they are able to go into parenthood healthy. They're able to go into parenthood with tools and skills that they practiced so that they're not
Mm-hmm.
passing the same thing down.
Right. Right. Yeah, so I think, the majority of people that are part of my audience are adults who are reflecting back on their childhood, trying to make sense of it. And a lot of those adults are parents of young children as well. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if we can speak to, the adult who maybe was abused as a child, was hit, and they're trying to reconcile or understand what happened to them. And maybe you can walk us through, like, what are some of the long-term effects that they might be experiencing as adults now?
So, if I understand correctly, just to clarify,
Hmm.
you're asking what are some effects that abusive parenting can have on their kids and what they could be
Yes.
experiencing right now.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what could some of those adults be experiencing now if maybe they're not aware of the way that this, parenting practice impacted them, or they're kind of in denial about its impact on them?
Okay. First and foremost, anxiety and depression. Those are some of the bigger ones. Um, Inability to self-regulate. So that
Mhm.
looks like the anger where you're seeing red, the want to lash out and immediately fight or hit somebody whenever there is a threat that's not really a threat that's posed to you, like road rage. If somebody's riding your bumper and you're wanting to get out of the car and throw hands with them, that's a sign of that same abusive style of parenting. People pleasing is another
Mm.
huge one. Lying. And I'm not talking about just like, like small little lies here and there. I'm talking like lying, like you don't know why you're lying, but you're lying.
Yeah.
Um, as Precocious puberty, like I said before, developing early, that is a huge one. Hypersexuality is also another one. Insecurities, another huge one. Perfectionism. God, oh man, there's a whole exhaustive list.
Yeah.
It can even go into your physical health. If you
Hmm.
are getting overweight, that also has ties in some abuse. Um, God, there's so much. I could keep
Yeah.
going,
No,
but basic.
all the symptoms you're listing, I think, are right in line with what I see as well in my own
Oh
work
yeah,
with
there will
people.
be, if you're getting spanked a lot, there's a cortisol dump into
Right.
your body, which is a stress hormone, which can lead to things like accumulated fat, so obesity. Think about how that is in America, and think about how it's really big in the South, where there's also spanking and poor diet. On
Mm,
top of epigenetics, no, it's like a hot pot for physical disabilities, diabetes, high blood pressure, pick one. And it's coming primarily from the lifestyle that we've been entered into from childhood. And it
mhm,
perpetuates farther up. And that abuse adds to it.
mhm, mhm. So how do you respond to people, because I'm sure people say this to you all the time, who say like, I was spanked and I turned out fine.
Baby, fine is cute. Fine is the low bar, right?
Mhm.
Like, I've been shot and I turned out fine. Are we trying to give our children fine, or are we trying to give our kids the best? Because if you're
Mhm.
trying to get your kid to be, like you, depressed, anxious, can't figure out your emotions, bad relationships, you're on your fifth marriage and all this, then go ahead. By all means. If you want your children to have a legacy where you are your best self for your child, so your child can be the best version of themselves, then baby, go see about yourself.
Mhm.
But let's be honest, a lot of the parents out here didn't really want to have kids. And so a lot of them are mean and upset to their kids because they either remind them of their ex,
Yeah.
it reminds them of the life that they should have had, or it reminds them that their life is screwed up. And so they're stuck with a burden instead of having a child that they can actually pour all of themselves into.
Mhm.
Let's keep it a buck about that. We need to really reconcile that first before we
Yeah.
keep moving on with our children, because nothing I tell you will work if you're looking at your child like they're a burden, or you look just like your damn daddy, or you look like just like your damn mama. If
Mhm.
you do that, nothing I can say is really going to help you.
Yeah.
But when you start to deal with it, when you really start to sit with yourself, spanking is not, you didn't turn out fine, baby. You didn't.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
didn't.
It's
And
so
you know you didn't.
true. Yeah. Yeah. There's always that quote that's going around that I don't know who said it first, but it's like that if you think it's okay to hit kids, you probably didn't turn out fine. That if you think that that is a thing that you want to do in your life, it's probably not fine. But I love what you're saying about like, why are we striving for fine? And also this idea of like, if you see your child as a problem, as something that's holding you back, as a hindrance, something you didn't want, like it's hard to engage
Mhm.
in respectful parenting because you resent your role.
Yeah. But can we also just, when I'm 6'8", right? I am a tall human being and I am not weak. I'm skinny, but I'm not weak. And I look at my students, and my students, now don't get it twisted. My students, I want to pick some of them up and throw them like a javelin across the campus. I want to grab one of these kids and straight up just body slam them like I'm Stone Cold Steve Austin. I get it. But then I look at these kids. These kids still have their squeaky high pitched voice.
Yeah.
These kids still can't really write very well because they're still developing their fine motor control. These kids can't dance on beat because they still haven't figured out rhythm yet. And you're telling me that you're going to be so threatened by a child, so upset with the child, that you're going to
Mhm.
put your hands on them and then do it? Being
Yeah.
upset is one thing. Doing it when a kid is half of my height, literally.
Mhm.
Kids can be half of your height. Why would you, baby, what happened?
Yeah.
Oh, it happened to
Yeah.
you too. That's why.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, we don't realize the power that we already hold without having to exert any of that physicality over the child. That like child didn't ask to be here. They rely on you completely for literally everything. Some of them would be dead, without their
Mm-hmm.
parent. And to think that you need to exert any more power over them than that, is really a fallacy. But I love that you're speaking about like that we all feel the feelings of rage, of discomfort, of annoyance. Like you and I are both well versed in this and working in it. And I feel that with my own kids. Like you feel that with the kids that you're around, but what you do with that feeling is what matters, is what I'm hearing
Exactly.
and what you're saying. Yeah. And everybody has some power over that to work on
Oh
that.
yeah. I got a 16-year-old. Like I said, he lives here and sometimes he does things that make me want to not do very Christian things.
Sure, sure.
But then I'm also like, you're 16. You don't
Mhm.
know your butt from a hole in the ground. You
Yeah.
still wet behind the ears. I can
Mhm.
help you. I can guide you.
Mhm.
Let's go. And he's a
Yeah.
good kid. It's just once you've seen the worst, once you have had one of your locks pulled out, you can't see life the same way. You can't see behavior the same way. You can't see your kid doing that small thing the same way. It
Mhm.
just doesn't
Mhm.
it doesn't fit.
Yeah. And every kid is like difficult in their own ways, depending on what the parent is triggered by, right? Like there's certain things that my, children around me get to certain milestones and I'm like, oh, that bothered me, but this didn't. And I hear from other parents that they're not bothered by this thing, but this other thing sent them over the edge because of their personality, their temperament, what they've been through, that there are no like difficult kids or bad kids that we have to like mold. It's really the just like what's happening in that relationship between
Yeah.
us and the child and their unique, you know, temperament. But another thing I really wanted to ask you about is like I've seen a lot of clips going around TikTok lately of adult children talking to their parents, and it kind of goes along the same realm of like, oh, I remember you beating us or hitting us, and the parents like, I never laid a hand on you. That never happened. And I'm wondering if you encounter this a lot as well, like this absolute amnesia about like the spanking or the physical abuse in childhood.
So kids will remember something traumatic because
Mhm.
it's a part of our survival. Our brain is going to remember that. Parents not so much because it's not a threat, right? It's not traumatic to them, it's traumatic to the child. In a lot of cases, I see this narcissism, pseudo narcissism. I'm not going to call it narcissistic like diagnosed, but I'm going to say it's a pseudo narcissism where there has to be a denial. For a system to exist, there has to be a denial that it exists. The reason why systems of oppression can exist so well is because they deny what happened. Pick a system of oppression
Good
and
point.
I will show you people who deny it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one of the ways that parents will still uphold their system of oppression is through denial. We see this, the best place to see this in real time is the movie Encanto.
Mm.
If anybody has seen it, Abuela, baby, you messed up the whole family. That's 2 generations, almost 3.
Yeah.
And she would deny it. I don't even think she fully actually apologized. I think she was just kind of like, yeah, I kind of, I did this. But she no kind of apology per se.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so a lot of parents go through the same thing where they just, well, it was so long ago, just let it go. Baby, I'm dealing with the trauma from it. I still
Yeah.
have the behavior that's associated with what you did to me directly. My life is a direct reflection of the trauma you inflicted on my life. Don't just tell me to get over it. Don't sit here
Mhm.
and try to deny it. It happened. Take accountability for it. Don't tell me I got to take accountability for my actions, but you're not willing to take accountability for yours.
Mhm.
That's not
Mhm.
how this works.
Yeah.
But we see whenever there is a system of oppression, hear me, there is always going to be denial. I don't just do parenting, I also do social justice.
Mhm.
And in every single system, there will be denial. So it is
Yeah.
not surprising that parents do the same thing. It is not
Yeah.
surprising at all. It's
You're so
actually
right.
expected.
Mhm. Mhm. I hadn't thought of it that way. I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's so true. And the denial is protective, right? Whether we're looking at that from a systemic perspective like you're speaking to, or the individual parent of like, I need to deny this to protect myself
Mm-hmm.
and the practices I engaged in, right, on a larger scale, um, from being looked at any further, or from the shame that I feel from that, which is it's how this stuff continues, right?
Yeah,
Generation over generation. It's, and that's why I'm thankful for people like you that are stepping out and talking about it.
I'm trying.
Yeah, I know it's rough out there. I get it for sure. I want to pivot a little bit because I mentioned to you that this month inside Calling Home, we're talking about father-daughter relationships, and you did a couple of videos on fathers, and I want to talk about those because one of the videos that you did was about how the bare minimum won't get you by anymore in fatherhood. And I was wondering if you can speak to that.
So I had the privilege of growing up with my granddad, who was a
Mm-hmm.
man's man, if I have ever seen one. Like, when I talk about a man who sounded like God himself, and he was a reverend, when I think of God sounding like anybody, it sounded like my granddad. And my
Mm-hmm.
granddad was this big, burly, 6'2", like powerfully strong man up to like his 80s. This man was strong. And when I saw what masculinity really looks like. It wasn't just being strong. He also had this softness to him
Mm-hmm.
where he wrote poetry for his wife. They were married
Wow.
67 years. He would write her poetry and just speak it to her. This
Mm-hmm.
man's man, right?
Yeah.
He, the only time I heard him say anything remotely sexist was when I was in the kitchen and my all the women in my family were cooking. He said, "Come out of the kitchen, boy, let the women work."
Mm-hmm.
Closest thing. But in the same way that he would say that, he would be up cooking for his family, cooking for the women. And if the women were sitting down, "Come in here, boy, be here with the men." Say less. I
Mm-hmm.
did not
Mm-hmm.
see the gender roles like that. It was, he saw what needed to be done and he did it.
Yeah.
The the weaponized incompetence that a lot of men are exhibiting today is
Mm-hmm.
disgusting because it's not showing that you're a man. You're a boy. You're a boy that just grew up and is smelly, and you probably got a job and you're probably not that good at it. It takes more than that to be a man. Now, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people can look at me and say, "Oh, I got fingernail nail polish on, and I got like a weird voice or whatever like that." They can say whatever they want. Baby, I'm more man than they could ever be. I know how to work with kids. I know how to raise kids. I know how to change diapers. I know how to set
Mm-hmm.
appointments. I know how to do everything that is expected of not a mother, a parent. I
Yeah.
can have those calming conversations with a child to help steer them the way they need to go. I also know how to be assertive. I also know how to fight. I also know how to hunt. I also know how to cook, fish, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I have the best of both worlds. Not because I'm trying to be more man than I am. I'm doing it because this is what's necessary to provide a life for my family, which is at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, what a man and what a dad should be. Should
Right.
not be just asserting your masculinity all over the place. If you have to assert your masculinity, that means you are insecure in your own masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
If you can
Mm-hmm.
exist as you are naturally, unapologetically, and get everything you need done, you can provide for yourself, provide for your family, give them training, teach them how to live in this world, provide them with the ability to be a self controlled, independent person. You're doing your job as a parent. If you
Yeah.
are out here yelling at your kids, if you are out here asserting yourself and flexing your muscles every 2 seconds, baby, that makes me think your parents probably raised you like crap. That means that somewhere along the way, you felt like you were less than a human, less than a man, and you have to prove to the world that you are. I don't have to prove nothing to nobody. I simply exist,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows who I am.
Yeah.
The same thing needs to happen to fathers. Fathers need to realize it's not enough that you have a thing in your pants and you sling it around everywhere. Anybody can be a dad. Can you be a father? Anybody can be a baby daddy. Can you be a father? Can
Mm-hmm.
you guide your children? Can you provide for your children? Can you protect your children? That's what it is. Can you be a spouse, a good spouse to your partner?
Yeah.
Not a, let me take the kids for a couple minutes and then play video games while they're sitting next to me. Not a I don't know, pick something that's kind of dumb that anybody can do. Mothers do so much and they're having to do so much after pushing a human being out of their body. The least a
Mm-hmm.
man can do, the least a dad can do is step up even more and be the leader and lead by example. I wish my wife would have a whole child, and I'm sitting here not doing that. I wish I would. I wish I would let her do anything. Not because I'm a simp, but because she's pushed out a whole human being.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nah.
What you're saying is music to my ears. I 100% agree with you.
And this isn't me
As a
simping. This
woman.
is just legit. She pushed out a whole being.
Right, right. And grew the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's
Swollen
a
feet, hunger
yeah.
pains, all that.
Yeah. It's a lot, and I think a lot of the what you're saying is like the bare minimum is just like providing. I think a lot of people think that when they check off that box of like, well, I paid for my kids' stuff and they had a roof over their head and they had food, I did my role. And what we're saying now and what you were really saying in this series is like there's more to parenting than doing what is like legally required of you by the state,
The
to not get
government
your
does
kids
that.
taken away. Yeah, exactly. So what type of parent do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody that just pays the bills, or do you want to actually be a parent that is leading and, growing this child? And I think it's good that we are being more upfront and honest about the absolute labor and intensiveness of parenting, so that
Mm-hmm.
maybe people think about, I'm actually happy when I see younger people being like, I don't know if I want to have kids. That seems really hard. Like, okay, good. They're seeing what this is like, and that it's
Mm-hmm.
not like a baby doll. It's a big undertaking. And I feel like that honesty can go a long way in helping people make informed decisions.
But I also want people to know that don't be afraid to have kids. A
100%.
lot of it is people have seen kids that have been raised poorly, or
Hmm.
they've seen kids and they have not been taught how to self-regulate as adults. And so they're also looking at kids that can't self-regulate and they're like, I don't know how to self-regulate that. It's a skills issue. I promise it's a skills issue. And
Yeah.
it's a skill that can be learned. Now, if you don't want to have kids, don't have kids. But if you want to have kids and you're just not sure how to do it, there's so many people like myself and so many others that literally have dedicated their lives and their time to teaching
Yeah.
parents how to work with their kids. Kids are wonderful. They are amazing. They smell weird, but other than that, they're great. They do
They
funny
are.
things. They say
Yeah.
funny stuff.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Having children has been the greatest, transformational act and privilege of my life. And it's also very hard and very wonderful. And it's all the things. But I do think you're making a good point that a lot of people who listen to this podcast feel like, well, I don't want to repeat my childhood. I don't want to do what my parents did. And that fear can stop you from pursuing something that you can be different. And the fact that you're thinking about it, that you're listening to this, that you're wanting to learn new tools tells me everything I need to know about how
Mhm.
you could be as a parent, right? Because you're aware and you're thinking about it and you know that you want to do something else. And so to me, that's the gateway. That's when someone starts following you or listening to this podcast, like, that they're on the path to making different choices, which
That's the
is
first
it's
step.
amazing. Yeah. Well, on that note, the one question that I like to ask all of my guests is what cycle you're breaking in your own family? What is a pattern that's ending with you?
Oh, man. First, hitting kids.
Yeah.
My mom did it. My dad did it. Not doing that to my kids. Yelling at kids. Breaking that too.
Hmm.
Not doing it. Shaming my kids. Guilting my kids. Not doing it. Therapy. My mom used to get therapy a lot. I'm getting therapy. My sister gets therapy. We getting therapy. That's norm in my family. Um,
Hmm.
ooh, insecurities. Breaking that.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of stuff I would go into that I'm not going to talk about everything, but there are a lot of
Those are all good
generational
ones.
traumas and curses that I'm breaking. And a lot
Yeah.
of it just really stems from not doing the same things to my kids.
Yeah. Hey, if you break any of the ones you just mentioned, I think you're on a good path. And I can tell that you are just by what you're doing with this platform that you've built. So I really appreciate you being here. I'd love if you could share with the audience where they can find you and anything that they can get access to that you're doing over the next few months or have in the works.
Absolutely. I'm currently working on a conference for gentle parenting, respectful
Awesome.
parenting. It's going to be pretty big. Got some big names
That's
already, a
great.
lot of great content creators that you probably all know that are on board. That will be going up in August 9th through the 11th, tentative, but so far
Amazing.
it's in the early inceptions. I do parent coaching as well. So if you would like access to that, you can check out my TikTok, my Instagram, all under the underscore indomitable underscore black man. That's where you can find everything I
Amazing.
do.
Great. And we will link all of that in the show notes as well. Well, Gabriel, thank you so much for coming on the Calling Home podcast. I learned a lot from you, and I know that the audience will as well. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us.
Thank you. You're so welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. All right.